Testing, testing.
Okay. National Disaster Coordinator, the local commissioner, Mr. Mandela Christian, and the senior med officer. Good morning, everyone. I will ask Mr. Pascal to lead us in a word of prayer.
Let us all stand and acknowledge the presence of the Father, Almighty Father. Almighty Father, we thank you for this day. We pray for continued guidance as we deliberate on matters of national security here today. We pray that you may guide all those present here today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Good morning. I want to officially welcome everyone to our press briefing. I want to acknowledge the press as well. I want to thank you for coming on such short notice as we discuss the emergency operating centers, shelters, and overall emergency and weather preparedness. As we had promised, as the Honorable Minister had promised in the past, the Ministry for National Security will be doing this from time to time, and it will be more frequent as we go along in terms of updating the public. As you are aware, last week we commissioned 2 shelters in Jimmet and Castlebruce, and this is to give you a little more information on them. And a little known, I think, fact is that we have also completed and commissioned a number of emergency operating shelters, mini ones, smaller ones. And so we are very happy today to give you an update on that. The Honorable Minister is the chairman for this event, and he will lead the discussion. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to the Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. Good morning to the coordinator of ODM, Mr. Fiscal Pascal. Also, Mr. Deliver, actually local government. Okay, good morning to all, especially PS Joan Commodore, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs. And also, I want to, in a special way, recognize Mr. Fiscal Pascal, the coordinator of the Office of Disaster Preparedness or Management, and also Mr. Toussaint, the local government commissioner, was also the chairperson for the subcommittee for shelters, and the chief med officer, Mr. Marshall, and of course, Mr. Mandela, the field officer, or the program officer, sorry, the office of ODM. I will also want to recognize in our mix the media fraternity, and good morning to our listeners. I've been advised here, so it's also on Facebook. And those of you who are viewing, thank you for being with us here this morning. As we just know from Ms. Commodore, the Permanent Secretary, what we are trying to do as a government is to consistently provide the public with much needed information, especially as we enter into the new hurricane season. Let me just call on all of us. I mean, of course, it's the mantra of the Labour Party to ensure that we're better when we do things together, and then by doing things on our own. So we have a responsibility as a people, first of all, to ensure that we do everything that is possible to mitigate against the possibility of any disaster event. More so, as you know, we are prone to hurricanes and in the hurricane season. And also, the government has a certain fundamental responsibility, and insofar as preparedness is concerned and the management aspect of disaster management, but from the standpoint or the home setting and from a community standpoint, we also have our own responsibilities to execute to ensure that we're prepared for any eventuality. And even within the business community, you also have to ensure that they themselves have their own disaster plan and to plan appropriately. But as you heard from the Permanent Secretary, we want to put some emphasis here this morning on the 2 regional shelters that were just recently commissioned. And as you know, only last week, your government commissioned 2 regional emergency shelters at Jimit and Casabruce. And of course, from what I've gathered from the public, they were well received by everyone. But I want to say that those 2 massive structures have now changed the landscape in these communities, that is to say Casabruce and Jimit, of course, and you're talking about districts there, and a number of communities will be touched in a practical way by those facilities, and both in terms of physical space and the services they will offer to the people of those areas and Dominica on a whole. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these facilities were constructed with you, the people, in mind, and to provide safe shelter during times of disaster, and also to serve the respective communities as resource centers outside a disaster event or period. And that could only have been done and conceptualized because of the visionary Labour Party administration. And as you know, those were conceptualized immediately after the passage of Hurricane Maria. And of course, there are many lessons that we ought to have learned from Maria, and certainly as you have seen in our own manifestation as a government, as your government, that this Labour Party administration and our leaders have learned a lot, and we have to ensure that we act in mitigation to prevent the possibility of having any serious effects if we were to be actually faced by another Category 5 hurricane. So that's why we are ensuring that we put mitigating systems in place in terms of our road infrastructure or resilient homes that we're building. And of course, one of the key things in preparedness is to ensure that our people are placed in safe environment. That is why we are deliberately building facilities for that purpose, namely, of course, as you have heard before, the Layo facility, the regional shelter in Layo, and then Casabruce and Jimit. And so those facilities were constructed very carefully and quickly undertaken, bearing in mind that we are still expressing the effects of the most devastating pandemic in our time, in our generation. And that notwithstanding, those buildings were constructed in a timely fashion, and I'm very much comforted by that. So most Dominicans are indeed comforted by that. And I want to say, firstly, and insofar as this facilities are concerned, we are the first in this part of the world, the Caribbean, so to speak. I don't want to be misquoted. And within the Caribbean setting, to have those deliberately built structures. And I think this tells you that when the Prime Minister made the pronouncement days after the Hurricane Maria, as the Dominica's commitment and his vision to Dominica becoming the first climate resilient country in the world, those were not only words, but of course we're deliberately working towards that in many aspects of our development going forward. So this building, as I've said before, and I want to reiterate for the purpose of emphasis, were deliberately constructed to provide safe shelter before and during and after an adverse weather event or any other aspect of a disaster, to accommodate approximately 500 people in Jimit and 300 individuals or people, sorry, my apologies for that, people at Casabruce. So we are talking in terms of 800 people can now feel better secured and do not have to worry about not having a place to be secured during, of course, before a serious storm or any other forms of disaster. But we are actually in the hurricane season, So we are speaking specifically to the eventuality or the possibility of being hit. And of course, we're hoping that we are continue to be spared by the good God, and because not to actually experience what we experienced almost 5 years ago. So I want to just say further that when you drive in the Casibus area, where the original shelter was constructed, and of course, when you drive on the highway in Jimmet, and you see this similar structure but bigger in size, they are not merely structures, big structures, with open space or floor space for people to be sheltered. And I am saying that because these facilities are properly equipped. And I want to speak to some of those functionalities here this morning. For example, you have large dormitories and male and female washrooms on each floor. We have showers, and similarly on each floor. And a modern kitchen furnished with an industrial type stove in both buildings, and of course proper fridges. And of course, so we're going to have people in that setting. So we have medical bays in both facilities, and of course a laundry room in all those facilities. And the issue of storage is also a very significant aspect in both in terms of preparedness and response to a disaster situation in the country. So the both buildings that we are speaking about this morning have tremendous storage capacity. One takes into consideration, we're right there in Jimmet at the ODM building, we also have significant storage there also. So the communities, starting from Charo, going back to Despo, etc., including and Dominican, of course, we have much enhanced storage capacity in that part of the island and Dominican Bay extension. The other important thing is the whole issue of backup power. That is also critical post a disaster. And you know, with a hurricane, we're talking about high winds and the donging of poles, etc. And it's most likely you may have an interruption for a period of time. Power supply from our main power supplier, that is Domrec. So we have a significant backup supply. We're talking about 80 kVA generators are installed at both facilities. Of course, and then you have the issue of capacity in terms of fuel. Up to at least 3 days thereafter, you have that. One of the things that we should have learned from, and we have learned from as a government, and that of course was manifested in the actual designing of these facilities, embracing the fundamentals of resilience. That is key. You know, it's part of our tradition in building, not only in Dominica, but of course, maybe if you go to the Caribbean, you'll see something similar, where people place the water tanks, on the roofs of buildings. You know, when we actually blessed, not only blessed, when Maria struck, most of those tanks were actually blown away. So we have to plan better, and we have to ensure, so when those buildings were designed, that was taken into consideration. So you're talking about water storage. You know, water is critical. I say water is life, isn't that so? Water is life. And I can recall after Maria, everybody was one. People were bathing in rivers together, the Belfast River, people of all types, you know what I'm saying? And also water to one. It's more importantly is to health and potable drinking water. That's also critical. So you're talking about, so we have built in the design, and actually as we speak, in both buildings, underground water storage capacity. So as we speak in Jimmet, next to us, we're talking about 120,000 imperial gallons of water underground as we speak right there. in Jimmy. We'll be working with the WASCO to ensure that the water is properly treated so that the quality will not be compromised. And we also have an additional 12,000 imperial gallons on the roof. In Casabus, we have 80,000 imperial gallons of water on the ground in tanks, and 8,000 of imperial gallons of water on the roof in the building in Casabus. What does that mean for the communities in that area? In the event we were struck by a hurricane, and I know we're blessed, but a number of people in those neighboring communities will be able to have some access to drinking water until we can actually supply, from other sources. So that is critical, and I think it's something that we need to underscore in the planning aspects of this government, in the planning and embracing, as I said just now, the fundamentals of resilience, and of course, and traversing on the track to Dominica becoming the first climate resilient country in the world. Now, so colleagues, our water capacity in those shelters will be able to, as I said, to assist people, and that is good planning. And as I've said before, water is an essential need, a very essential need. And the idea to include underground water storage tanks in the design of this facility is indeed a testament to the forward and progressive thinking of your government, the Labour Party administration, into incorporate resilience in our development planning, and to ensure that sustainability of these buildings and investments can be maintained and observed. So, at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve is, ladies and gentlemen, friends all, is improvement in the emergency sheltering and capacity of this country, and to ease the burden. And one of the things that we have experienced in the past is that, as we have known before, and it's not something that, as I said before, I made reference to that in Casabus, that is not unique to Dominica. In first world countries, people actually seek shelter in school, in domes, and other government buildings, etc. So and we experienced that after Maria, and those of us who are old enough would have been at primary school level when Hurricane and Maria and David struck, and some people had to be sent overseas to go to school, and schools are not able to reopen on a timely basis because they were being used for shelter. So what it means, and one of the things when you talk about resilience, and your resilience as a country is tested, and when you're able to recover and get back to a sense of normalcy as quickly as possible. That is also important. So if we can get our schools liberated from being used as shelters as early as possible after the passage of a storm, the students, of course, will be able to go back to school in a quicker period of time, and thereby creating the pathway for returning to normalcy as quickly as possible. So that is very critical, and I'm happy for that. So what we have now, before, in various districts, like for example in the Casabus area, historically the school has been used as a shelter, but it is that burden. In Maho, for matter of fact, we use the community center. We now building the school there. That would be something of the past. We used to use, of course, churches in Maho, and so that those things would be something of the past too. And the same for Massac, we have some challenges there in the Kenfield area. And in particular, as I said, and Campbell is very high on the vulnerability index of this country. Campbell is after Good Hope, maybe is the second most vulnerable community. And we actually, I'm very happy for that, they can sleep better at night. So ultimately, what we want to do very soon is to have them relocated. So again, having said that, Barry has been very fortunate to be working with the factors over the period of time, and we would not have been able to get to the point of having those two wonderful structures without instrumentality and involvement of the European Union. So we want, in the most profound manner again, to express our appreciation and for the very generous donation through the 11th European Development Fund and under the envelope for that purpose. Of course, the whole issue of resilience contract for rehabilitation following a hurricane, and that is something the European Union, of course, is very much passionate about, and we're happy that they're very early they were able to work with us and have the level of confidence in the people of Dominica that those projects could have been in a timely fashion, and I'm happy for that. So we are not stopping there, and in terms of the two facilities, as you've heard, we'll be able to use for other purposes. I'll make reference to that in a while. But of course, we have to also think about our Carinago brothers and sisters, and that will be the next serious shelter, deliberately built for that purpose. That will be undertaken in that part of the island. So this year, in terms of our capacity, in terms of shelter space, we have seen an improvement, therefore, as a result of those interventions. And of course, the resilient homes we have been building over the years. After Hurricane and pre-Hurricane Maria, we had almost 8,000 people who actually needed shelter. The figure is like 7,200, something like that. Well, pre-Maria, yeah, 7,200 pre-Maria people who actually needed shelters. And we're now talking about after, just under 5 years, after the most devastating storm in this country and maybe in the world, we have gotten to a point where only 640 people, 3,640 who are requiring school, who are going to be requiring of shelter. But then, if we put that into proper perspective, we have our capacity in terms of shelter space. We're talking about 8,200. So that in itself is a government that is already placing at the forefront the whole issue of the safety of our people and ensuring that we build with resilience on our mind and to mitigate against the possibility of any disaster, so our people can be kept in a safe zone. So we have moved from a period of not having enough shelter space to now having well above the required shelter space that we need as a people in this country. And I think that in itself is good news. So from a next standpoint, which is also important when you're talking about preparedness, evacuation, and our ability to manage a phenomenon in terms of a disaster situation, it goes back to the whole issue of training, especially from the community level, because the first responders are always the people from the communities. So we have to ensure that before the people who are charged, before the functionaries of the state who are charged with particular competence can be dispatched to a particular locality in the country. We have issues with not having proper access, etc., etc. The people are always the first responders on the ground. So it's actually important that we ensure that we train as much as possible people from the various community levels in disaster management and response and all these kind of emergency issues in terms of telecommunication with the usage of radio, etc. This is critical because the whole issue to establish communication in terms of response, that is very, very critical. And the whole issue of shelter management, that is also very important. So we have been able to finalize shelter managers for this regional shelters. There's a distinction between a shelter manager in terms of a hurricane, shelter managers, and then the people who are actually going to manage those two facilities. We have developed the plan that speaks to the governance structure, and for that purpose, where there will be proper descriptions of purpose tasks, etc. So we have to ensure that those buildings are properly managed and are not made to just stand there without being used in a very sustainable manner. So having said that, we are well advanced by the ODM and NIPO in partnership with the IOM to execute a simulation exercise. Because it's one thing to have the structures, it's one thing to have plans, but the plan and the structures are tested when you have a real event. So if you're not able to execute that plan by way of precision, you almost useless to have a plan. And we can speak about all the spectacular interventions and buildings that we have. But if something were to happen and we're not quick enough, and people have specific responsibility to be available, it can be, of course, a terrible situation for us. So we have to actually test our level of competence in the event that something were to happen. And so, therefore, we're planning a simulation exercise on June the 9th, Friday, to the 10th of June at the Lai Regional Intervention Shelter. And that is done, as I said, for the express purpose to test the management and execution procedures. That, of course, is a very much important aspect of preparedness, and I'm hoping that can go well. As I've said before, the operational plan has been drafted for the use and management of the shelters during adverse disaster, and also when we do not have any such disaster. So what do we see happening in terms of the management? Someone will be responsible for the shelters and the facilities, and the manager of GMIT or possible facility will be charged with the responsibility of dealing with outside of that. When we have shelter managers, their role is to manage the shelter specific to a hurricane or an issue. But outside of that management, we have to have somebody who is in charge of the building, both in terms of a hurricane or any other event, and outside, and to oversee the day-to-day management of the building. But more importantly, ensuring that the building is functional and in a state of readiness, and should anything because of a disaster may occur. But having said that, how therefore are the communities in the GBD and facilities to benefit from those facilities outside of a disaster situation? And that is where I think the role of a manager is even more critical. So one of the things that the Labour Party has been doing over the years is try to empower people. Education, academics, but we also need to develop a cadre of young people who are doing vocational skills. People who can do electrical wiring, electronics, with that sector. So this is still buildings that will also have research centers. We will be actually at those two communities so we can have those kind of programs in our education. Of course, you don't want to have a reception. It's all the good things to encourage people to get married. Understand? And it's in a family. That is critical for someone's wholesome development. The Labour Party always encourages marriage, family. So those buildings there and Unit with a spectacular view. You see the sea and you see possible to have a spectacular view. So of course, people in the community who want to get married, want to have a reception. I think something, of course, they can. It's not only having a building to serve only during a crisis period or etc., but a building also to add value to the lives of the people in the various districts. That is in the Castlebrooks district and in the Jimmy district. As you know, as a member of parliament for the Maro constituency, I'm elated for that facility. I'm happy for the people of Jimmy and all the other adjoining communities. And I want to express also again on my gratitude to the European Union and on the government of this country. So having said that, though, the onus also is on members of the various communities to demonstrate the highest level of ownership of these buildings. And therefore, the people have to be seen as true custodians of those buildings, those facilities. And come up as communities sometimes, so we can plant flowers around the community to ensure that no one defaces the building. The issue of vandalism that we have to denounce and guard against, and it would be something terrible to have those wonderful facilities that can be used even outside of a disaster situation for us to engage in the issue of defacing and vandalizing these properties. It would not be a good story for the people who have acted the European Union, who have actually partnered with us to ensure that we have gotten to the point where we are providing secure space and shelters, and that is critical during any disasters. It could be an earthquake, whatever the case may be, a hurricane, etc. So we have to show, demonstrate the highest level of ownership to those facilities. So, and the investment, you're talking about $33 million in those facilities. This is a serious, very serious investment. So I wanted to do justice this morning to take some time out there this morning to speak to those two regional shelters. And we are blessed in Dominica. This is a beautiful country, and I'm confident, I know, because of what those buildings offer, we'll be able to further empower people of this beautiful country. Let us, as a people, the government can play its part. Government has played its part in providing those facilities, and providing a number of other interventions going forward. But we as a collective have to embrace, that milestone in our dynamic Dominica, and play our part in the development of our communities and this beautiful country as a whole. And when we're talking about resilience starts firstly with the individual. Then you have the home, you have the community, and then you have the country. So it has to be an individual, a community, a broader collective, national effort was to embrace this milestone of building a dynamic Dominica. And if you follow what your government has been able to do over the years in its planning and prioritizing its developmental strategies, you realize that the government is purposefully traversing towards the track of a dynamic Dominica and building the first climate resilient country of the world. So what we call on you as communities and as a nation to assist in that process and to play your part. And I will rest there for now and to allow Mr. Tuse will speak about the perspective. So thank you very much, the media fraternity, for listening to me there this morning, and thank you, Dominicans, for listening. Yes.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Let me recognize the Honorable Raymond Blackmore, who is the Minister responsible for National Security and Home Affairs, also the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs, Ms. Joan Commodore, the National Disaster Coordinator, Mr. Fitzroy Pascal, Mr. Marshall Alexander from the Met Office, media who are present, and of course, those of you listening and of course viewing this very important press conference. I want to begin by setting into context the significance of shelter management as it relates to disaster risk reduction. It is often said that disaster risk reduction is all about saving lives. Yes, property to some extent, but the ultimate goal of disaster risk reduction, or what we refer to as disaster management, is about saving lives. And importantly, if we are talking about saving lives, then shelter management becomes a very critical aspect of saving lives of individuals in communities and Dominica by extension. And so shelter management is a prerequisite to attaining your disaster risk reduction approaches, particularly in the context of Dominica that's very vulnerable. I want to make reference to the Climate Resilient and Recovery Plan 2020-30, and one of the stated target is that of 0 fatalities after any major shock or adverse weather or climatic events. And certainly, with your shelter management being strong and effective, we can certainly see this attainment of the 0 fatalities as it regards to any event that may impact us. But that's also largely depend on the support of the population understanding the need that they need to protect themselves, their families. And so it is a very, very important task that has to be performed by all and sundry, the wider population, people understanding that you have to protect yourself. You have to save your life. Right? The state will do everything necessary to put the mechanism in place, such as shelters, emergency shelters, but the ultimate responsibility is that of you as people in Dominica to ensure your safety. Of course, the Honorable Minister alluded to the improvement in our shelter stock, and of course he indicated clearly that has been attributed to the Government of Dominica Comprehensive Housing Development Program, where a number of families were assisted throughout the island in the improvement of their homes, thus building back better. Of course, importantly, the initiative of government in terms of the apartment buildings, the most recent being that of the Riverside apartment in the city of Roseau, that has not only provided some comfort to families, but also allow families to become more resilient and providing a safe environment for those families as far as adverse weather events is concerned. And it just alluded to the very critical 2 regional emergency shelters in Jimit and Casiblos that has significantly increased our shelter capacity. And he gave you the statistics. We have moved in terms of shelter capacity in 2021, 7,096 in 2021 to 8,200, as he said. So we have an overall increase of well over 1,000. I just want to draw to your attention that we did conduct what we refer to as a national emergency capacity and needs analysis. We do that every year. So last year we did an analysis, and last year we needed to provide emergency shelters for 3,931 people. And the Honorable Minister did mention that has gone down in 2020 to 3,640. So there's a significant decrease. It continued. And prior to that, for 2019, for 2020, we were at 4,000 something people that we had to provide shelters for, and that went down to 3,900. So certainly measures have been put in place to safeguard our citizenry in Dominica. I need to say that, like anything else, we have got to ensure that we prepare the communities, but we provide the emergency shelters. So for example, for this year, we have seen an increase, and that's largely because of the 2 emergency regional shelters that were constructed and commissioned. So we have moved from 114 shelters in 2021 to 119 in 2022, and that's largely because of the 2 regional emergency shelters. Of course, the Honorable Minister did mention that particularly the two regional shelters, it's really going to ease the burden on the schools. As you know, 45% of our emergency shelters are schools. And so you are looking at a situation this year where you're actually removing a number of schools from that list. Both Cassibrus Primary and Secondary schools are going to be removed. The Canefield Massac Primary School is going to be removed. The Mao Community Center, a community facility, is going to be moved. The intention here, and I will just inform the listening public, the intention here is to allow as many people as possible within this Mao catchment area to be accommodated at the Jimit Regional Shelter. So we are looking at, as the Honorable Minister indicated, we are looking at moving the Campbell. So we're going to at least look at examining the Campbell Primary School as well. So that in itself is really easing and has eased the burden on the schools for both Jimit and Cassibrus. And that has augured well for us in terms of our preparation. I need to also add that the Honorable Minister did mention that we have the shelter managers and assistant managers to execute the works as it relates to when the shelters are activated. But we need to go further. It's not just having them, it's building their capacity, providing them with the requisite training. And so what we've done over the last few months is that we have engaged and provided training for 120 shelter managers, most of whom are new ones. And of course, we went a step further in looking at prospective shelter managers, because we do recognize the critical role that these individuals play in executing and allowing us to have effective and efficient shelter administration in Dominica. And so we have been able to provide it. And what we've done is we have looked at the Kalinago territory as a separate. So we've done the training through the 7 local government districts, but we also added an F district because we felt that we needed to identify Kalinago as a separate space and provide we call it the F district. So we consider Kalinago territory to be the F district, and we specifically conducted training specific to shelter managers in the Kalinago territory. And we believe that will augur well for the regional shelter that will be constructed soon in the Kalinago territory. I need to also inform the general public that after Maria, or during Maria and after Maria, there was a significant gap in terms of information flow from the emergency shelters. Yes, it may be as a result of communication breakdown and otherwise, but importantly, we needed to capture very valuable data as it relates to the number of people in shelters, the condition of those individuals, the amenities in the shelters, the supplies and things of that nature. And that in itself, we experienced great difficulties. And as a result of that, we have developed what we call a shelter management information system specific to emergency shelters around the island. What it will do is, 1, map all of our shelters for us. 2, provide, it's a digitized system, I must say, so it will capture valuable data on the emergency shelters when they are activated. We're talking about information regarding to the shelters and the biodata, so we will know exactly who are the people, what are their conditions, their ages, and things of that nature, how many children, how many babies, how many people, who are the medical conditions of those individuals in the shelters, the shelter administration personnel. All of that will be captured, and importantly as well, to look at the facilities itself, the amenities, and of course, importantly, the supplies as it relates to those emergency shelters. So that's in a step in the right direction. It's a step forward, and we believe that will augur well for us in Dominica. I must also inform the general public that, like anything else, there are some communities without emergency designated shelters, and we're talking of communities like Collioure and Coolbistry. For Collioure and Coolbistry, they both have schools, which is relatively safe. However, the schools are located in a very vulnerable area, and so we cannot use those 2 facilities for that purpose. And we must inform the general public that Collioure and Coolbistry are among the 13 most vulnerable communities in Dominica, along with Campbell and Good Hopes and Sauve Petit Superior, as the Honorable Minister mentioned. So we're going to Collioure, Coolbistry, there's Miro, there's Taro, there's Bon, and there's Layupak Sultan. However, arrangements have been made for residents of those communities, and I will just have to give you some ideas as to the arrangements that we made. So the residents of Collioure, they will move to the Layo Regional Shelter. The residents of Coolbistry, they will go to the Monrachet Resource Center. And the residents of Taro will move to the regional shelter in Jimit. The residents of Bon will move to the Portsmouth Secondary School and the Dodan Primary School, and the residents of Layupak Sultan will move to the regional shelter in Jimit. So that's the arrangement we have for those communities without designated emergency shelters. And while I say that, we're really looking forward to, because it means, therefore, we have to move people. So we'll be working closely with the Transportation Subcommittee to ensure that we move the people as early as we can to those facilities that we have so designated for them if we were to be impacted by any systems during the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. Now we come to the point of, importantly, supplies. And of course, like anything else, there must be some basic supplies. And when I'm talking of supplies, I'm talking of not necessarily food items, but non-food items for the emergency shelters. So we're talking of things like first aid kits, things like cots and blankets and mattresses. And so what we've done so far, we have supplied and preposition supplied in more than 95% of our community centers. So many of our community centers, we have already provided that supply. It's already there. Community centers, most, if not all of our community centers are used as emergency shelters. So we have provided those with supplies, and the supplies, again, I would reiterate and mention, we have a refrigerator, stove, cooking gas, first aid kits, cots and blankets, kitchen sets, hygiene sets, solar lamps, and things of that nature. Our intention is that, and we are pleased to, and I'm sure pretty soon that those two facilities will be commissioned, that of the two warehouses, one in Cassibros and in Cotton Hill, Portsmouth. And the intention is to pre-position those supplies for the entire east at Cassibros. And when we talk of the east, we're talking of Atkinson back to Petit Soufriere. All of those communities in the east will be serviced by the supply. So we're going to pre-position those supplies as soon as the place is commissioned. We're going to pre-position the supplies, so it makes it much easier. If something were to occur, those supplies could be accessed through the warehouses, the warehouse in Cassibros. And a similar thing for the north. We're going to pre-position supplies for all of the shelters, the emergency shelters in the north. And the north, we're talking of Portsmouth back to Vickers, Penville, Benz, and Dodan, and those areas. The intention is to pre-position those supplies to those communities. The challenge we have, though, is while we have the supplies, the challenge, though, is, as I said, the number of our shelters are schools, and the schools are a challenge in terms of storage capacity. And we are looking at the possibility of extending the similar prepositioning for areas in the south. We're talking of Grand Bay and Tetmon and Bacatel, and similar for the parts of the west. Already we've covered Maho and those areas, but parts of the west, we're talking of the areas like Dubla. So that is the approach that we are taking in terms of preparedness and supplies. I must say, we are way better than we were in 2022 than 2021. We were better in 2021 than we were in 2020. And so what we're doing is we are making gradual progress. And I'm not even saying the progress is slow. It's steady progress, significant progress that we're making. And I am pretty heartened by the fact that Dominica, and I did some research to find out if anywhere in the OECS there is anything of, or there are constructed regional emergency shelters. And so far I've not been able to find out, to get any information as it relates to any of those islands in the OECS where there are regional emergency shelters. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we were in Barbados at a regional local government conference, Caribbean conference. And of course, importantly, that came up, it's something that we have to take credit as Dominicans, and we have to give credit to the government of Dominica. I could not believe, I made two presentations. I made a presentation on behalf of Dominica on looking at the approaches to building resilience at the community level, the Dominica experience. And I also did a presentation on women in local government in Dominica. And to be very honest, I saw that the Dominica model and approach to resilience took the entire, in fact, we spent an entire day looking at it, and everybody wanted to clearly understand the Dominica model and how Dominica went about moving from ground zero. I won't say ground hero now, but we moved from ground zero to where we are in terms of our resilience approach. And the similar thing that we're making strides in terms of our shelters and our shelter administration. Importantly, as we continue to move forward, we realize clearly there is going to be, based on the projection and based on the figures we're getting, I can tell you there are a number of individual homes that are currently being constructed through efforts of the government of Dominica island-wide. And so come 2023, we may even see a drastic reduction in the number of persons who may require to be sheltered by the state-funded emergency shelters. And so importantly, we want the listening and viewing public to understand clearly that we have been playing a significant role in that regard, and we're looking forward to the cooperation of the citizenry in ensuring that we continue with our resilience approach at the community and national level.
Yes, a very good day to all. Let me recognize the presence of the Honorable Reuben Blackmore, Minister of National Security and Home Affairs, PS Joanne Commodore, my other colleagues, members of the press, and the listening and viewing public. We are into the hurricane season, and as you heard, the prediction is for an above normal season, which is the same as last year, with the expectation of 14 to 21 named storms. And in terms of preparation, the Met Service, at present, we do have what I call a resilient Met Office building, which is located in Jimit at the back of the Office of Disaster Management. And that building consists of 2,000 square feet each floor. Some of the facilities in that building also include a weather broadcast studio, the head office for the head of department, quality management systems room, the staff room, kitchenette, and downstairs we have a conference room, storeroom, another office. And in the past, the Met Service has suffered in terms of space, and now we're in a position where we have increased space for staff to work comfortably. Also, we do have a network of stations being installed around the island, and that is about 44 weather station, 44 monitoring stations, which includes weather stations and river water level monitoring stations around the island. Now, these stations is a network that is well distributed around Dominica, and all the information from these stations will be going to that central hub, which is the new Met Office building in Jimit, via satellite. So we would have the information being recorded out there, and it will be sent directly to the new Met Office building, where that will be analyzed and stored and distributed to the various stakeholders that will require the information. Some of these stations would serve as early warning system, where you have, together with radar information, you would have rainfall measurement information coordinated with water level monitoring to serve as a flood warning system for certain areas. So this is the improvement that is being made to the Met Service, and this year we are on heightened alert with staff monitoring and storing information and looking out for the development of tropical cyclones in our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. One of the things that we need to do as we build on the physical infrastructure insofar as our Met services are concerned is the whole issue of the augmentation of the governance structure and the human resource base. And that is why we have planned, of course, in terms of the governance structure and as how do we enhance the human resource component which will provide for better transparency and accountability. It's the whole issue as the possible placement of a director of Met Services. That will be critical too, so you can have proper division of labor, and so you can have things being done by way of better precision going forward. And what we have tried to do as a government, and as you have heard articulated by our Prime Minister, is to ensure the whole issue of mitigation and preparedness. Those things are not being seen as a seasonal thing. Before in the past, so something actually was triggered during the hurricane season with no real planning and to sustain, a plan, etc. So I'm happy that we are moving in that direction. And when very soon what we're doing at the location in Jimit is finalizing the internet and stuff like that, and then to have the commissioning of that facility. And once, so that the public will be further apprised of that once that date is finalized. Reference was made to by Mr. Toussaint to the warehouses in Cotton Hill and Castle-Bruce. We'll have greater details as to the commissioning date once that is finalized, and so the public will be better apprised of those developments going forward. So I want to say, so we're going to turn now to the man who does it all, Mr. Pascal, in terms of the coordination of all the efforts to ensure that there's proper synergies in our effort to prepare for a disaster situation. Mr. Pascal, and apart from, I heard because it was raised in the last sitting of Parliament in terms of an overall national plan that we have, but in terms of upgrading the plan to fill the gaps. And of course, because of Maria, we'll have some issues that we have to address in that national plan. One of the things we have been doing over the years is to working, and we had Mr. Mandela there within SIDIMA to help us with kind of technical services and expertise that we need to further improve our infrastructure in terms of physical and the human resource component. And the issue of having a national disaster plan updated is also critical. And as we speak, through SIDIMA, we have been able to source a consultant that will engage having, of course, interviews with relevant stakeholders, so that we can actually update that national disaster plan. The expectation is to have that plan completed, updated. There is a plan, but I'm not saying to have it updated by the month of October, from what I've been advised. So we'll go to Mr. Fiscal Pascal, and we'll speak briefly about the broader issue of preparedness.
Good afternoon to all. Let me recognize the presence of the Honorable Minister, Honorable Reuben Blackmore, Minister for National Security and Home Affairs, Permanent Secretary, Ms. Joanne Commodore, my colleague, Mr. Toussaint, and also Mr. Marshall Alexander, and my staff member, Mandela Christian, and the media, listening and viewing public. So just following from Marshall's presentation, climate change is set to increase the frequency of heavy rainfall events and intense tropical cyclones. And globally, we have seen the devastating impact of weather-related disasters. In Dominica, the impact of Tropical Storm Erika in 2015 and catastrophic Hurricane Maria in 2017 brought home this reality to our people, signifying that climate change impact is not a phenomenon of the distant future, but is our lived reality. In 2017, Dominica experienced its costliest weather-related disaster, Hurricane Maria. The island incurred economic loss of over 225% of its gross domestic product, GDP, and regrettably, there were losses of human lives. Global agreements designed to reduce the impact of hazards on lives and livelihoods called for investing in disaster risk reduction, for resilience and the enhancement of disaster preparedness, for effective response, and to build back better, guided by lessons learned. And government's response is to implement initiatives and strategies geared towards reducing risk and vulnerabilities with the vision to become the first climate resilient country of the world. The plans and programming of the Office of Disaster Management aim to strengthen the national disaster management system through every means possible, to include resource mobilization, trainings and capacity building, public education and awareness, strengthening disaster committees, and fostering a collaborative and enabling environment with key stakeholders who support disaster risk management. The National Emergency Planning Organization, or NEPO, charged with the responsibility of managing disasters and ensures that Dominica is in a state of preparedness at all times. While activities carried out by the national system with the goal to reduce risk to the citizenry, the onus is on everyone to take steps to contribute towards effective disaster management on island. And the various task forces of the NEPO continue efforts in preparedness and readiness of the state. And I will just briefly give some examples, and Mr. Christian will elaborate on them. Multi-hazard public awareness campaigns continue. Security protocols are constantly being updated. The disposal of white goods and removal of derelict vehicles are ongoing. Transportation arrangements by land, sea, and air are in place. Database of heavy equipment maintained and equipment prepositioned to reduce downtime and to disruption to access. The utility companies are constantly updating their business continuity plans. The health services augmented and decentralized through the provision of health and wellness facilities. Also, the emergency communication installed in communities and their training provided for the use of this equipment. There is improved collaboration with the local radio clubs like the Dominica Amateur Radio Club. The National Emergency Telecommunication Plan to improve management of communication initiatives was recently approved by Cabinet. The early warning systems for hydromet, seismic, volcanic hazard monitoring are constantly being improved. There is a tsunami ready certification process which is ongoing. The relief storage capacities, which Mr. Toussaint mentioned, they are increased and they are decentralized. So these are just to name a few of them. And of course, the reason why we're here today
the significant improvement in the provision of safe shelter to residents. So indeed, tremendous work is ongoing and will continue to reduce risk. And like everything else, there is always room for improvement. Undoubtedly, the challenges in disaster management will occur, but the resilience of our systems and people will ensure that we continue to move forward in securing the well-being of all and ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
So, yes, but before I'm not sure whether Mr. Mandela, the whole issue as to people's individual responsibility from the home setting and the community, especially. What are some of the basic steps that one should take to secure his home? You know, I was reading on the Prime Minister's Facebook page, and he has an excellent breakdown as to the steps. You know what I'm saying? That one ought to be taken from his own individual standpoint within the home setting. But somebody listening, I'm not sure whether it's Mr. Mandela is going to do it, or are you going to do it? So, okay, fine. So let's go to Mr. Christian. Mr. Christian has been
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Blackmore, Permanent Secretary, Commodore, Mr. Pascal, National Disaster Coordinator, Mr. Toussaint, Local Government Commissioner, Mr. Alexander, the Senior Met Officer, the media, and of course, my fellow Dominicans. A pleasant good day to everyone. And just to pick off on this very important discussions, we at the Office of Disaster Management, one of our key functions is coordination. And that is coordination of the numerous stakeholders and partners who are implementing disaster risk reduction programming and preparedness efforts in Dominica. And the reason for this is we want to ensure that this programming is aligned to our national, regional, and international disaster risk reduction frameworks to which we have subscribed in Dominica. So for example, the National Resilience Development Strategy, the Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy at the regional level, the Sustainable Development Goals, the International Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. We want to ensure that all these interventions are aligned to these strategies and frameworks to which we have subscribed. We also want to ensure that the work of all our partners, that it is all complementary, that the interventions of one is not undermining the work of the other. So we, as I mentioned, we play a key role in seeing the overall picture and ensuring that there is coordination. And how do we do this? We do this through the National Emergency Planning Organization, NEPO, as it is commonly known, working with through the various subcommittees of NEPO to implement our programming, through capacity building initiatives, the incorporation of advancements in technology. You have seen and heard of the vast infrastructural developments that's going on around the country, the construction of the shelters, the resilient houses, the health and wellness facilities, more resilient education facilities. So we are doing our best to learn from past experiences, the most recent one, Hurricane Maria, and to take the lessons learned from these and to incorporate them in our programs and plans moving forward. And it's not only the national lessons learned, but also lessons learned from our sister island states, our fellow CARICOM states as well, because we all share the same hazard environment in CARICOM. So we are learning from their experiences and utilizing that to enhance our programming. So just to speak a bit more on our preparedness here in Dominica, at the Office of Disaster Management, the National Emergency Operations Center, this facility in which we are right now, it is operational, as you can see. We have a functional backup power supply, backup water supply, emergency communication system that is tested periodically and it is functioning. We also have arrangements for the alternate National Emergency Operations Center at the Windsor Park Sports Stadium should we need to relocate our operations. So, and also we have arrangements in place. We have arrangements in place to accommodate and to facilitate the National Emergency Operations Center staff at the Office of Disaster Management should we activate. Now, all this work that we have been doing, all the preparedness that we have been doing at the Office of Disaster Management, we have been working over the past year to decentralize our operations. So everything is not being done at the ODM alone. So we have been doing tremendous work through the establishment of district disaster management committees, and Mr. Tussell would have spoken a bit on that, where we have established district disaster management committees in all of the 7 districts and the Carinago territory, and these in turn are comprised of community disaster management committees. The districts are comprised of communities, and we have established a few more community disaster management committees, and I really want to take this opportunity to thank or to applaud the efforts of CREED and the local government for the establishment of these committees. So work continues on this. We have also seen, as Mr. Tussell would have mentioned, the tremendous work that has been done in enhancing our shelter management and our shelter capacity. In the other aspects of our preparation, you have heard of the work that is being done by the Public Utilities Subcommittee to ensure that we have mechanisms in place for clearing of roads. So we have updated our database of heavy equipment operators, all from not just the big trucks and so forth, but down to the chainsaw operators as well, and persons trained, and we know where they are situated across the island. So should the need arise for them, for their services to clear debris or rock falls, we can easily mobilize them to provide that service. There have been advancements in the health services, as I would have mentioned, with the health and wellness centers. They are outfitted with backup power and water supplies. We also have on standby a mobile hospital with 40-bed capacity, medical bed capacity. It has an AC unit. It has backup power, as I said, backup water. And we are able to deploy that and mount it anywhere across the island should the need arise for additional medical space post-disaster event. We have also seen developments or advancements in our relief and welfare programming. All of our homes, we have been checking on them, working through the Relief and Welfare Subcommittee to enhance their capacity, ensure that the homes are secure enough, and they are outfitted with some backup supplies as well. The Food and General Supplies Subcommittee, they have been working to ensure that we have adequate supplies of food and general supplies on island. Normally during the hurricane season, they stock extra supplies for in the event that we become impacted. We have a bit of extra supplies in store on island. And we have been also working to increase our storage facility, as Mr. Pascal would have mentioned also, through the construction of 2 additional warehouses, district warehouses. So there was one in Cotton Hill, Portsmouth, and another in Castle Bruce. And the purpose of this is to preposition items at these facilities that can serve the districts, so that everything will not be focused, or all operations will not be centered at the ODM. We have also made advancements in our emergency communication system. We have installed over 15 HF and VHF radios in vulnerable communities across the island, and that number is expected to increase as we identify secure locations for the installation of additional systems. We are also working on the repeater sites at Mont Espanol and in Scotshead, to enhance the security and to change out the faulty equipment and install more advanced technology, advanced equipment, repeaters there, installing also backup power or renewable power supplies, solar power. And we are also looking to develop a new repeater site in the heights of Salisbury, that's Hoja, Salisbury, to further enhance our communication island-wide, emergency communication, I should say, island-wide across Dominica. And that is coupled with the work that we have been doing, or the training that we have been doing across the island to train personnel in the use of these equipment. And I also want to mention, while I'm on emergency communication, we are not only preparing for hurricanes. Tremendous work has been done on our volcano seismic and earthquake early warning systems. We have increased our network from 2 operational stations. After following Hurricane Maria, the network was seriously compromised. And thanks to the interventions of the government through mobilizing funds and resources through the World Bank, we were able to, and other partners, we were able to get funds to upgrade our network. The goal is to have 16 operational stations across the island. Right now, we have installed 8 of the 16 stations across the island, and the project is currently ongoing and should be completed hopefully before the end of this year. And as Mr. Alexander would have mentioned, the work is ongoing on the hydrometeorological network, it's not just weather stations, but hydromet stations that would hopefully enhance our forecasting, weather forecasting, and early warning capacity in Dominica. And also the tsunami ready programming that we have just commenced in Dominica. When it comes to transport and evacuation, we are working through that subcommittee to update our database of not only public sector assets, transportation assets available to us, but also the private sector assets that we have access to, and the marine transport. We have identified and geo-referenced helicopter landing sites across the island, and our field officers have been, and even our district and community committees have been assessing these sites to ensure that they are cleared and we are able to utilize them as helicopter landing sites should the need arise. So that is one thing that we have been doing there, and we are working through the regional system to access additional vehicle support if we need. I'll speak a bit more on that a little later. When it comes to environmental protection, working through the Environmental Protection Subcommittee to do cleanup works, and we really want to commend the work of the village councils, the districts, and the community disaster management committees on the the drives to clear the white goods and also the solid waste, I should say. And we have been providing support to them to clear these white goods and to dispose of them properly. And not just the white goods, but also the waterways, cutting off of trees. We must commend also the work of the NEP in supporting that as well. And when it comes to security, we know the challenges we had post-Maria. And I note that the police department, they have plans in place for ensuring that law and order is maintained post a hazard impact. And the private sector entities, we have been working through the Dominica Association of Industry and Commerce, and we conducted a simulation exercise for them a few weeks back, about 2 weeks back, to test their operations to ensure that they have business continuity plans and that they are able to provide operations, well, the essential operations before, during, and after any hazard impact. When it comes to public information, as you will see, we have heightened our awareness on all our media platforms, social media, our website. We recently launched our website. We revamped our website, and that was launched in early May. I think it was on May 2nd. And we, again, thanks to the support of CREED and the Commonwealth of Learning, The public is now able to access updated information there or via the website. We have also working through the Public Information and Education Subcommittee of NIPO. We are working to increase our awareness campaigns, all the PSAs, these announcements. We will see a lot more of that for hurricanes in particular, because we are in the hurricane season. And not only in English, working with partners like the IOM for targeting our migrant population, so the Haitian, Spanish, even the Chinese population in Dominica. We are doing our best to translate in their language so that they can understand the messaging. And I also must mention that we are working with entities like the DAPD, the Dominica Association for Persons with Disabilities, to ensure that we are not leaving out these vulnerable groups, and the Council on Aging as well, that our programming and our early warnings are targeting them. There are mechanisms in place for reaching these vulnerable populations. So that is a lot of the work that some of the work I should say that we are doing nationally through the various NIPO subcommittees. And I just want to also note, as the minister would have started speaking on, the arrangements that we have through the CARICOM Regional Response Mechanism that is coordinated through the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA. So while we are doing our best to utilize the available resources and to optimize their outputs to heighten our preparedness activities in Dominica, in reality, there may be a situation where our efforts are overwhelmed. But we have access, we have arrangements, and we have made arrangements, I should say, to access the wider resources available through the CARICOM mechanism, through the regional response mechanism. So we have, and it will be at no cost to us. So we have access to the CARICOM Disaster Relief Unit, that is a team of disciplined personnel, so military, police, fire from across the region, and they can be deployed if needed to provide support with relief management, with emergency communication and restoration of critical lifeline facilities. We have access to the CARICOM operational support team, and these are personnel like the National Disaster Coordinators and emergency operation personnel, and they can be deployed to any impacted state to provide surge support to the National Emergency Operations Center in any impacted state. I mean, in fact, just last year, I was deployed to Haiti as part of the CARICOM operational support team to provide support to the government of Haiti there on behalf of the government of Dominica. So it's all part of the regional solidarity that we work with for implementing disaster management. We also have access to the CARICOM disaster assessment and coordination team, and the rapid needs assessment team, and these are damage assessment teams. So we have access to personnel, professionals, subject matter experts through the various regional entities and organizations, and they can be deployed to conduct, I should say, assessments on the damage to it could be the entire country, to a particular community, or to a particular sector, education, agriculture, tourism sector, and produce reports outlining not only damage, but also recommendations for addressing the immediate, medium, and long-term effects of the disaster. And we also have access to regional search and rescue team, search and rescue personnel or teams from across the region to support our national search and rescue operators and teams in country. And finally, I would say, because I don't want to go on too long, we also have access to the Multinational Caribbean Coordination Cell, and that is the militaries in the region. Not only the region, but that is the U.S., the British, the Dutch, the French, and the Canadian militaries. They operate in the region, and via that cell, we have access to the vast assets that they come with. We have seen, like, for example, during Maria, they came in not only with boots on the ground, but with helicopters, with these huge marine vessels, with capabilities to to produce, to desalinate water and produce vast quantities of potable water, and a number of other assets. And we have access to them and the regional security system as well to provide, to support our operations. So just want to note, while we are doing all that we can to optimize the resources available to us in Dominica, and that is all during the COVID pandemic, that would have placed a strain over the past few years on our economy. We are doing the best to optimize our resources to enhance our preparedness for any event, not only a hurricane event, but a volcanic eruption, an earthquake, a tsunami could occur at any time, so we have to be prepared for multi-hazards. It's not only hurricanes. But also, even if our systems are overwhelmed, we have strong arrangements in place through the regional response mechanism, the CARICOM mechanism, for accessing external support. So all in all, I will say we are at a good state of preparedness for any event, and we continue to operate. We are not resting right now and believe we have everything under control. We continue to advance our plans. We continue to conduct simulation exercises. As the minister would have mentioned, we will be conducting a simulation exercise next week to test our shelter capacity. And we have some further exercises planned as the year goes along. So we continue to strengthen our systems and incorporate all our partners. So that said, thank you very much.
I know people want to listen to the news, so we're not going to prolong this briefing for much longer. Just to say thank you very much, Mr. Christian. And on the whole issue of our radio telecommunication system, and added to the site that Mr. Christian referenced in repeater sites in Salisbury, we have two additional sites, 3 sites, one in the north and one actually in the extreme south of the country. And we're going to give specific location of those sites. We also have 25 substation, and I want to also commend the effort of the police. I know from the community level there has been extensive training. And, but we also have the fire and ambulance department. We have the police, and working in concert with ODM. I want in a particular way to commend the Dominica Amateur Radio Club, in particular my good friend Mr. Pellery, former Deputy Commissioner of Police, who's very passionate about that. So we are actually working together with a number of players. Insofar as working from the community standpoint and cleaning out drains and ravines or culverts, etc., cutting overhanging trees or branches, and to deal with all potential hazards. We have to also recognize the tremendous effort of the National Employment Program staff, the beautification aspect of that program. The NAP workers were involved in the beautification effort, did a tremendous job, and after the passage of Hurricane Preparedness, and they, from a community standpoint, have been engaged in beautification, cleaning up drains, etc. We also want to recognize the effort and to call also on all Dominicans to play the part and to not actually litter and to dump white goods into waterways. Ravine might look dry for now, but if tremendous rain, you know what we experienced in Erica. And even before Erica, we had Ophelia, and Maria, of course, was the worst of it all. So we have ought to have learned, of course, from those events, and I know we have learned. And let us all do what we ought to do as a people, to prepare ourselves and to arm ourselves And if we are to do that together, and to do each one of us playing our part, it makes it easier for the country to respond. And as you rightly heard from Mr. Toussaint, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to minimize as much as possible is the loss of life. And all those small things can help. It was one thing to have a hurricane, but there are secondary issues that can cause tremendous flooding. And branches, of course, down in pools, etc., and trees, and all those things that we have to protect ourselves against. So thank you very much, members of the media, those of you who joined us, listening to us on the Facebook pages. Thank you very much. And P.S. I'm not sure what to say or any questions you want to ask.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think one of the things that I heard recurring in the talks here today is how do you build personal resilience? And I heard some tips there today, keep your dreams, your waterways, etc. But in terms of building personal resilience, I think that we will seek to bring you a little bit more on that in the near future. So expect to hear from us soon again. And I think that, Honorable Minister, we will indeed be having as many of these as possible to ensure that the public is aware. I think one of the things that we need to understand is building awareness and resilience. It's not an overnight process. It takes time, it takes money, it takes effort, but everything will be lost if we do not have the participation and the cooperation of the public. So without further ado, I will open the floor to any questions, if the Honorable Minister. Okay, I'll open the floor to any questions.
Before I take any questions, just to say that on the whole issue of preparedness and planning, we have, as you know, a national framework, NIPO, and we have 9 subcommittees. We had actually, within the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs, actually planned and actually wanted to have the committees meet as much as possible. We projected at this 46th meeting, wasn't that? That we wanted to actually have during that period of time. So there will be a meeting with the line ministers, with the various chairpersons of those subcommittees, and subsequent to that there will be a NIPO meeting, of course, as you know, it's been chaired by the Prime Minister in due time, to ensure that, that all the systems are in place and we're actually in a state of readiness for any eventuality that may actually strike us. So at this point, if you have any questions to ask, before I'm therefore open.
Thank you. But I just wanted to ask you to give us perhaps what's the current situation on, I know there was a list post-Maria of communities to be relocated and so on. I'm not sure whether, because a lot has been done in terms of building resilience here, so I'm not sure to what extent we still have the list as it was previously, or has it been revised because of all the work we've done so far in terms of the, not just the shelters, but all the work that has been done towards resilience. So where are we with that list? Do we still have a list of communities that we still plan to relocate?
Well, I think when I listened to Mr. Toussaint, he made a reference to that. In terms, as you know, government is very purposeful in its planning, and of course, Rome was not built in a day, but Rome was built, that understanding. And of course, we have been able to identify, as we've done in the past, the vulnerable communities. You may recall that when Erica struck, we had a particular plan. Speak to the reference to Campbell. We looked up also at the village on the west coast of the country, Kulibish, that was make reference to an issue of Gudo. Then you had next phenomenon, and we had Maria, which also, of course, will actually have actually impacted on the speed in which those communities could have been relocated, because when Maria struck, you would appreciate that almost 80% of the housing stock then was actually almost totally destroyed. So everybody had a housing need, therefore. And I asked the Member of Parliament for Campbell, as I've said, and when Erica struck, and we were looking at from my recollection, 57 Campbell, good up, wasn't that? And of course, along Kulibi Street area, we also have issues, some issues in Lower Collier. So the issue is not that the government has not actually put that on the back burner, but of course, in a systematic way, that will be addressed, and of course, any adjustment to be made will be announced. But as far as I know, the government is still committed to, in a structured manner, in a very systematic manner, and address those issues.
I do have a question for Mr. Tussell.
As we speak, we are doing the necessary collating of the relevant data for the people of Campbell. And Campbell, of course, as you know, you certainly see some movement in the earth, some movement, and that's why we believe, and with the foresight of the Prime Minister and the consistent advocacy of the Member of Parliament, that is, Campbell is a community that we have to address in due time. So we have not forgotten about the people of Campbell. We have not forgotten about the other people who have to be placed in a safer zone. As I said again, I want to say for emphasis, Rome was not built in a day, but it was built. And okay, I want us to also appreciate the tremendous challenges in relocating people. It's not the same as building apartments for a community. The number of implications and variables that have to be taken into consideration. For matter of fact, when I have not heard of, seen of a country within the Caribbean space that has relocated almost an entire village. I mean, this, I don't think the government is getting enough credit for that. To have relocated the people of the Savannah, and you have some people maybe in Pristina who are also actually accommodated there. This is a monumental and extraordinary undertaking. And it was done. It was nowhere in the Caribbean I've heard of that. To relocate, and the amount of planning that had to be done, and the financial resources that had to be, and technical resources that had to be mobilized, and the issue of counseling and getting the people to buy into the idea. And if you were to go to 37 right now and you see it in Bellevue, to see the wonderful community that has been developed, it's extraordinary. Right? So the government is not sitting in the rail doing nothing. It's about working, and then as time progresses, we have more issues emerging, changing the landscape in terms of the time horizon you would have set under normal circumstances to have achieved a particular goal. So Maria, we're not hiding being Maria, but Maria and truly change the landscape. And after 4.5 years, when you look at Dominica, I mean, I think we take a lot of things for granted. When you see what has transpired in Dominica, prior to Hurricane Maria, when Maria struck, we had about the household, when you do my counting, based on my research, was about 25,000 households. We have so far surpassed that right now. Not only by replacing the houses that were de-roofed and helping people, right? One of the first things the Prime Minister did after Maria, while there were a number of people making noise about people getting too many tins of sardine and corned beef, right? 3 days after, the Prime Minister was already saying, because I was there every morning working from my home, every day, every night, along with Dr. Mark Colin McIntyre and Honorable Francine and Catherine Denner and the Prime Minister, 4 of us, every day working. And he said, comrade, Mr. Something, if we do not help the people of Dominica to recover the homes and fix the homes, we're going to have problems. 3 days, 4 days after Hurricane Maria, why people making noise? Why members of parliament were upset about people getting two extra tins of sardine? In my view, if a poor man get an extra tin of sardine, one love. Okay, I mean, the Prime Minister was talking about, we were talking about building homes for people, assisting people. You get my point? Because everybody there, Tom, Jack, and Harry, had a house in need. That would have changed the national landscape. What about by Erica? Because you had a more devastating storm by the name of Maria that put everyone flat on his or her ground, Laurel. You understand what I'm saying? So I wanted us to put that into proper context, therefore, because I'm particularly impacted because I know what the people of Campbell are going through. And that is my number one priority as a member of parliament, to ensure that the people of Campbell are placed in a safe zone. And it will be done once the Labour Party remains in office. It will be done. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I have a question for the local government commissioner, who is also on the shelter committee, subcommittee. The big picture, we have a lot of resilient facilities now, homes, shelters, and so on and so forth. In that context, to what extent do you feel residents still need to have that family disaster plan in place?
Thank you very much for your question. Let me just add that since Maria, we have seen a greater need for a well-structured approach to disaster risk reduction at the community level. And one approach is that of the development of family emergency plans. So that is very critical. And what the plan does is a very simple thing. I need to inform the viewing and listening public. It's a very simple plan. It basically articulates the activities that need to be undertaken by the family before, during, and after, and associating those responsibilities, assigning tasks to family members. I'll give you, for example, if there is a drain close to the property of family X, right? That drain has to be cleared. And so within the family plan context, they would assign, let's say, the father and the son to do the clearing of that drain. Checking off your roof and your windows and that sort of thing. We see the critical nature of this aspect, this family plan. Because if each and every family within a community has its own plan, that will filter into the community plan. And I must tell you that we are going through a process where we are strengthening on those plans. Our intention is to ensure that we have a comprehensive plan for each community. And we have gone a long way. I will tell you, for example, under our national resilience approach, taken into consideration from a community standpoint, we are initiating what we call a community emergency readiness initiative. What this initiative does is basically building the capacity of the community or communities to independently respond after any adverse weather event for at least 15 days. So, for example, for 15 days after any major shock, major climatic, adverse weather events, these communities can independently operate. There's sufficient food and water supply. There is sufficient backup electricity or energy, as we call it. And the structures of those communities are so strengthened. So that approach we're taking, we are looking at capacity building. And prior to that, we did a national assessment of communities in Dominica. And we ranked communities on basically 4 areas. One, the most vulnerable communities, and we mentioned the 13 most vulnerable communities, that what we have been able to identify. Then the second ranking was the more vulnerable, and we have 28 communities in Dominica that are more vulnerable. Then we get the less vulnerable, which is the 14 communities, and the least vulnerable were about 10 communities. And what we've been doing over the last, since 2021, we've been going through a process of building capacity. So we first started with a comprehensive capacity building programs for the most vulnerable communities rather. We're talking of Campbell, we're talking of Kudo, Petit Soufrière, Saint-Sauveur, we're talking of Pichelin, Bacatel, and those areas. And we're continuing that process with the more vulnerable ones. The intention is to ensure that we build the capacity within those communities, build the structures, the disaster committees, the local authorities, the other interest groups such as women's group and youth groups and institutions of that nature, because we believe, and we are also tying that in with the need for us to strengthen on our approach to family plans, because we believe that is a very important mechanism in ensuring that our resilience approach in the communities are strengthened. And that is the thing, as we get the opportunity, we'll continue to encourage. We're encouraging each family in Dominica, if you have not done so, begin the process of doing your plan. And your plan, in some respect, we say it's simple, but it's a very, very important exercise, because it allows you to have a look at your approach as a family. For example, if something were to happen, and you take it beyond just the community, your disaster plan, family plan should also include what happens in the case that something occurs at the school that your children attend. I mean, who would, for example, within the family, who would ensure that, let's say, for example, you have 3 children, one at convent, one at grammar school, one at SMA. Something occur at any of those schools. Who would ensure that, so that both parents do find themselves at grammar school or SMA or convents? So that sort of thing, we are taking it just beyond. We are going even further, because there may be activities that may occur that at the schools in particular. And so we really want to encourage and express the need for communities and families to understand that they need to begin the process, if they have not done so, of the development. And not only developing the plan, but testing it as well. You know, develop your plan, it's okay, but you need to test it to see whether it's really workable, or if you can make certain adjustments to it to ensure that it is so strengthened.
Do we have any more questions?
Okay, all right. If I may ask it, I'll just go ahead and ask it. Thank you very much. I know Mr. Christian made reference to the hydromet stations, you call them, and I wanted to ask Mr. Alexander, you know, the whole concept of accurate information during these times, you know, the hurricane season and what have you, how does that system fit into your plan to ensure that the public always gets, you know, accurate information, the accuracy of the information that we get? You know how people tend to roam the internet looking for weather reports outside of what you might be putting out. So, and there are times when there is a little bit of conflict. People have conflicting information because they explore the internet and pick up information wherever, you know. So, speak to that issue if you may. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. As it relates to accuracy of information, the Met Office, I think the information coming from the Met Office is accurate, but we have to also consider the timeliness and the quality of the information received. But in terms of the new network of stations, we'll be actually getting the exact data around the island that would tell you the actual value of rainfall, that in terms of the rainfall that happens around the island, you know, in reference to just having an estimate from a radar image or something like that. But I think your question alluded to the information received in terms of tropical cyclone information. Well, in reference to that, we are still going to be receiving information from the National Hurricane Center. And I think the issue would be regarding the timeliness of the dissemination of information. But in that kind of forum, in the Nimit Office building, we will have adequate space and adequate staff to be able to move quicker to provide the information to the public in terms of access to the relevant stakeholders or the chain of personnel that we would need to contact to send out the information. So that would happen, that should happen quicker. So information would go out as early as possible, because most times we are sometimes beaten by social media in terms of the timeliness of our dissemination of information, because of our coordination in terms of our space and our contacts and so on. But our information will still be coming from the National Hurricane Center, but I hopefully that should increase or improve the timeliness of the distribution of our information.
That is one of the things that I want to add to that. That yes, we are.
And at this time, we're going to have to cut this broadcast short. Of course, you were just tuned in to the press briefing on the Emergency Operating Centers, Shelters, and Emergency Preparedness being carried live from the Office of Disaster Management Conference Room. Of course, the name is Azari Anironi Williams. I was on with you throughout this afternoon's outside broadcast. Would like to say thank you to our technicians on scene, the man Denzel Shillingford and Aaron Wilshire. And taking you back to Studio 1 DBS Master Control. Of course, up next we should be in with your 1315 Total News Package.